Welcome to Sense and Sustainability, your podcast channel for sustainable procurement. We hope you like what you hear. Please go to www.iso2400.org for more information, learning resources, tools and much more.
Welcome to Sense and Sustainability, your podcast for sustainable procurement. I'm Sean McCarthy, Director of Action Sustainability Community Interest Company. This is part two of a fascinating series of interviews with Cathryn Greville, who's a colleague of mine in Action Sustainability. And Cathryn's going to talk a little more about delivery around fairness, inclusion and respect and performance measurement. A lot of our audience are procurement people that are involved in procurement in some way or another. What would your advice be to procurement people? And this is kind of quite a new concept for some of our audience. So what would your advice be for procurement people being asked to deal with this issue?
Yeah, great question. Look, as a procurement person, you're really in the driving seat because we all have purchasing power. You know, everything we buy, whether we're procuring goods or services. So the potential for positive impact is really enormous. So if you're a sustainability procurement professional, you can think about who you hire and who you promote in terms of your own business and your own teams, because the impact that you have can actually, have a great impact on people's skills and their experience and their careers, and then the communities that they come from and the communities that they live in as well as a result. In terms of the performance of what you actually procure, so embedding fairness, inclusion, respect considerations and people considerations in decision making around the purchase of, for example, materials that you might need or services that you might acquire is really critical. And I think I'd say to procurement professionals that this is not, your obligations are not a tick box exercise. Arguably they never have been, but more and more so as corporate responsibility is really in the limelight. We're starting to see that with some of the legislation that's coming through. We're starting to see that with some of the cases that are coming through, that you've got an obligation here to actually be doing something about this, to be driving forward and making positive decisions about what you procure, because that's where a huge impact lies. And there's links to that just transition that I mentioned earlier, Sean, as well, because without representation, without having the right people at the table and everyone having a seat at the table or making the table bigger, so to speak, there's no equitable progress in climate change. So, and I think from a procurement perspective that this is one of the areas that we have the most power, because really, where you spend your money is a hugely impactful area, just as it is in terms of finance and how we make choices about what we finance and where our money goes.
Yeah, it's a really exciting time to be in procurement. I tell people this continuously, but it really is, because as you say, procurement people have got an awful lot of power to actually change things. I also like what you're saying about kind of the real performance. Show us what's actually happening, rather than we ticked all the boxes and that's okay now, because we tick the boxes. Nothing has changed, but we've put all the policies in place and that sort of stuff, because each organisation is different. I mean, ultimately, you're heading towards a goal of greater inclusivity within a business, but how you get there is different depending on the organisation. And some of these tick box things just require you to do things in a certain way, but actually, that's not how you might do it in your own business.
Absolutely, and I think that's critical, Sean. You've touched on a point of what you actually do in your own business, and that it's really important that you actually diagnose what your own business's issues are, because there's a lot of potential issues, as you've seen. I've spoken about a couple of them that come into what we're talking about in terms of the people element of sustainability. And your business might be doing quite well in a particular area, but in other areas falling down. And if you just rely on anecdotal evidence coming up through the ranks or what people are telling you, you actually don't get the full picture, particularly where you have a lack of psychological safety, for example, because not everyone in a business is going to personally or even culturally feel comfortable raising issues with the business. So you get a very skewed version of what's actually going on in your business. So from that element, I think the monitoring the performance is really key. And if you're in the built environment sector, this is there's an opportunity to do that through, we run an annual diversity survey of the whole built environment sector. It's free to participate, and we actually benchmark businesses against the sector and against the Office of National Statistics, or ONS, data. So you can get an idea as a business, where you stand. Gathering that data and using that data is really important, because I always say that if you can capture and monitor diversity data, then you've actually got a window into tracking your progress. So, and there's 3 key reasons for that, because if you don't capture data, you literally don't know where you stand. So firstly, you use the data to identify the issues in your business and to really, I guess, benchmark how your business is going. Often businesses want to do that against their competition, which is fine. Happy for healthy competition is always good in driving this forward. The second reason is you need the data to actually underpin the actions that you take. So if your actions aren't evidence-led and appropriate, you might be wasting time, wasting money, and not actually addressing the key areas and not addressing them in a way that's going to drive it forward for your business and for your people. And thirdly, you need data to actually measure and monitor the progress. And that's where the companies being able to say, this is where I came from and this is where I've got to, is really key. So you can't track the success of any initiatives you put in place unless you have the data to back that up. And in terms of certifications, there's certainly one element of a diversity inclusion strategy internally. They're one element of looking at how you're treating your own people, for example, internally. But it can't be just that. It can't be used as a tick box exercise. And I think clients are savvy about this. They know, yes, that could demonstrate commitment, but you might sign up to something and then do nothing. And a lot of clients we speak to would prefer to see that. They know when it's sort of diversity washing, so to speak, a bit like greenwashing. There is such a concept as diversity washing. They know when a company is actually really committed and doing the hard yards, because there will be data coming out. There will be things that identify that business isn't doing well in particular areas, and that's what we expect. Whereas companies that say it's all going fine, aren't we wonderful across all these elements, we know that either they're hiding something or they don't actually know what the true situation is in their business. So that's where having that demonstration of the journey that you're on, and recognizing that, a bit like any area of sustainability, this is a journey, and businesses are on at different stages of their journey, at different levels of understanding. We have to meet them where they are, and we have to sort of help them along that journey. So sometimes you've got businesses that haven't even thought about this at all yet. They're just going on their way. They're not focusing on people. They're not focusing on an environment where people can actually thrive, and therefore they don't understand the business benefits that actually brings to them. Well, we see that as a massive opportunity, because there's so much the businesses can do to really use this to enhance what they're doing, their productivity and innovation, and how they're delivering value for stakeholders. And I think that's true for the sector itself, but it's also true for those who use the environments that the sector creates. So the value, when we look at the value proposition of businesses and just how much value they can have in this space, it's really broad. We're not just delivering an end product. We actually are delivering an environment in which people are going to be for a long time, and which is going to stand for a long time. And that's an important element to be considering in terms of the value that we add.
Thanks. Cathryn, you've worked in the built environment sector, as you mentioned, both here and in Australia. How do you see the built environment sector, the sort of health of the built environment sector as far as this issue is concerned?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I guess I work in this space, Sean, because the built environment sector has a really long way to go.
An honest answer is fine, yeah.
But having said that, we've got some really great stuff happening in the built environment sector. So I guess what we have is a huge difference between those companies and the leadership styles that are actually leading this, and those that haven't quite recognised its importance, haven't turned their mind to it yet. So if we just look at the people component, for example, In the UK alone, we have this widely recognised skill shortage. We need about 225,000 extra construction workers by 2027 to meet the demand in the UK. And that's particularly in infrastructure, repair and maintenance fields. At the same time, we have a huge skills gap in terms of upskilling those in the sector to be able to identify solutions and work collaboratively to achieve them. So when you've got this skill shortage and people shortage, as well as a skills gap, you at the same time, you have to be drawing from your full talent pool. And whether workplaces are fair and inclusive and respectful and are nice places for people to be plays an enormous role in why people join them, how effective they are in their jobs, and how they work together with other people, and whether they actually stay as well. So I'd like people to think about this. It's not just accommodating difference. So we're not just talking about diversity, for example, which is really important. Representation is really important, but it's about a lot more than that. It's actually about setting your workplace up to ensure that people can thrive, and businesses benefit, of course, from this as well, but making sure people can thrive no matter what background they come from, whether they come from a different sector, for example. I'm quite excited about people coming into the built environment sector from other sectors. There's a lot to learn from manufacturing, for example, and, aviation and other fields where, there's some really great work happening, and obviously it's a different environment, but there's a lot of cross-industry learning that we can take away from what's worked in other sectors. Yeah, there's a lot in terms of where we are in the built environment sector. I might talk a little bit, Sean, about our diversity survey and what that actually tells us, if you like. So we know when we're talking about we're not drawing from the full talent pool, we have the latest from our 2023 diversity survey that tells us just how much of a problem that is. So looking firstly at gender disparity, women in the UK make up about 50% of the population, but are only 29% of the built environment sector. And there are only about 24.5% of applicants into the built environment sector. So we haven't got enough women attracted to and wanting to join the sector to actually make headway on that. We have a persistent gender pay gap of 18.8% in the sector, but a bonus pay gap of up to 31.8%. I mean, that's huge. And at the same time, so we haven't got enough women coming in, but we're losing younger women. So of the people that leave the sector voluntarily, 46% of those are actually leaving before the age of 34. So we know that we're culturally, we've got a big way to go to make sure that those that are attracted to the sector, who do want to join, don't come and realise, actually, this isn't for me, and opt out to other sectors. And that's where those policies and practices around things like flexibility and parental leave really come into play. But it's also about the general culture in which we operate as a sector. So ethnic diversity, for example, we currently sit at 13.6% of our sector coming from ethnic minority backgrounds. And that's a huge catch-all term to explain the various categories under the ONS categories for people from ethnic minority backgrounds. So 18.5% of our population in the UK are from ethnic minority backgrounds. So already there's a 5% gap in terms of opportunities and people in the sector. And that cultural element really comes into play when we look at the applicants. So has been a lot of work in previous years around the attraction piece. We need people from different backgrounds. We need non-white candidates to want to come and join the built environment sector, and we'll do a lot of work around that. Well, last year, we actually had 52% of applicants coming from ethnic minority backgrounds. So we know that attraction is not the issue. But the issue is it's between 1.2 and 6.4 times harder to get hired if you come from an ethnic minority background. So if you're white, you're looking at a rate of about 28 to 1, so 28 candidates to 1 successful hire. If you come from an ethnic minority background, on average, it's about 90 to 1, 90 applicants to 1 successful hire. But it really, how you fare depends on what ethnic background you come from. So some we're looking at similar rates, about 32 or 33 to 1. But if you're Indian, it's 183 applicants to 1 successful hire. And if you're Arab, it's about 105 to 1. Or if you're African, it's 101 to 1. So there's a huge issue in terms of what's happening from the application stage right through to the hiring stage. And one of the questions we got asked when we first started reporting on this was, surely some of those candidates actually don't have visas to work in the UK. So that will account for a lot of the figures. So we tracked that last year, and actually under 25%, so less than a quarter of applicants actually had any issues around right to work. The remaining 75% had absolutely no issues around right to work, notwithstanding that, of course, companies can sponsor visas and so on for people with the right skills. But even putting that aside, 75% and more actually had no issues with right to work in the UK. So we know that there's issues in terms of bias, lack of understanding and so on coming through the pool. And we know that because we track applicants at different stages. So we track right from the application stage to the shortlisting, the interview, and then the hire rates. And even just looking at that interview to hire rate, you actually fare worse if you're from an ethnic minority background. So say to get through to the shortlisting, you've got to have merit, you've got to have the skills, and you've got to meet the job description. To get through to an interview, you've got to, be sort of fairly top of the pool of candidates, right? But then to have it harder, several times harder to actually get the job from an interview to a hiring stage, that's really just highlighting that we need a lot of work around anti-racism and anti-bias and understanding people from different backgrounds. Some other areas of focus, Sean, are disability. So 17.8% of the population in the UK identifies having a disability. Only 2.8% of our workers in the sector actually identifies having a disability, and only 1.8% of applicants. So that's a huge pool of people. And particularly as we have more roles that are flexible and the ability to do things remotely, and technology that's enabling us to actually have different roles and different people able to do them, that's a real area that we need to be looking at as a sector, so we're not missing out on that incredible talent. And for disabled applicants, we're looking at about a rate of 25 applicants to one person to be hired. So, there is definitely that both attraction and accommodation and piece there as well. If we just touch on age, for example, we've got an ageing workforce. So just 10% of our workers are aged between 16 and 24 now. By comparison, in 1990, that was something like 22%. And we've seen the flip side. So 25% of our workforce in the built environment are going to retire in the next 10 years. But again, if we look at 1990, that was only 10%. So we've seen a direct almost flip on those figures, where we're not bringing enough young people in to actually match the people, the talent drain at the other end. And again, policies and about phased down retirement and part-time work and flexibility really come into play so that we can retain our older workforce and really, build off the skills and the mentoring and coaching opportunities and the corporate knowledge that's held by a segment of our workforce. Yeah, I guess that's a bit of a snapshot of just how far we've got to go. But I mean, the really good news is that getting this right has so many additional benefits. So we've seen in research, and certainly our own intel in the FIR program shows that fair and inclusive and respectful environments actually positively impact everything from well-being, safety, innovation, teamwork, and we've touched on helping businesses to win work and to improve their productivity and meeting customer expectations. It'd be remiss of me as a lawyer not to mention minimisation of risk. Huge benefits from a risk perspective. This should be top on the agenda of all in-house counsel and boards. It really needs to be an issue that is dealt with at board level. It's a cultural issue and a behavioural issue and a leadership issue. And it really is something that is critical to businesses retaining their social license to operate in the first place. So I'm excited, I guess, about the fact that you can have such great benefits. You can have better and quicker decision making. You can actually have operational efficiency and enhanced profit by doing things that actually make places nice places to work and have a greater social impact on the communities, and at the same time are helping us solve the climate crisis and really putting the people who should be involved in the driving seat of the solutions that we need to be finding.
And just the stats that you quoted from the diversity survey, it's huge, isn't it? Can you give us an idea of the sample size, just so the audience don't think we've spoken to 70 people when you see
Oh, of course. Yes, I was remiss of me not to mention that, Sean. Yes, so we capture over 500,000 workers from 530 odd businesses. So it was something like 526,000 workers represented in the 2023 data, and that's only growing. So we've been running that survey as a industry-wide survey. It was only its third year last year. We're now open for the fourth year, the 2024 survey, and any businesses that are working in the built environment sector, I strongly encourage you to have a look and go in and contribute to that. Whether you have all the data across all the metrics or not, it's a really good starting point. It gives you an idea of what best practice, diversity data monitoring actually looks like, what data you should be capturing. We are working with businesses to reduce the unknowns. So many businesses don't collect enough data. Only 54% of businesses actually monitor diversity, and many don't actually collect it across all those metrics. So there's a big job and a big improvement opportunity for businesses to be front runners in this, to really lead the field. And it does improve their competitiveness in the market, as well as informing their decision making and helping them effectively solve problems. Yeah, over 500,000. We are trying to get that up this year. I know the Construction Leadership Council has actually incorporated the diversity survey into its goals, and they would like to see over 1 million workers represented in the data by 2025. So we've got a little bit to go, but pretty confident that as businesses really start to recognise the importance of people and the importance of knowing the backgrounds that people are coming from, the representation, where they're drawing their talent from, that this will increase as a business priority.
Yeah, thanks, Cathryn. Yeah, 1 million. Yeah, no pressure there then.
be lovely, but I guess that the broader the data set from different types of businesses across the built environment sector, the better that we're able to actually assess where some of the biggest issues across the sector are. So we use the data as the Fairness, Inclusion, Respect program to drive what initiatives we put in place for businesses, to help businesses and individuals actually move forward on the FAIR agenda. So it's really critical to identifying the issues that we try to address. But in terms of both businesses individually, seeing where they sit and benchmarking themselves, it's really helpful. But if you are in a particular area of the built environment sector, being able to compare that market segment to another market segment in the sector is enormously valuable as well. So we cover everything from facilities management and then the property and real estate side, right through to the construction companies and their entire supply chain. So we've got a real diverse mix of businesses that are captured in the data, some more represented at the moment than others. We really want to drive that upwards and make sure that any supplier within the built environment sector is reporting into this data. And the great thing is that you get a report that tells you exactly where you sit. That's unique to you. It's not shared publicly, so you don't have to worry about that. But better for you to know where you sit and be able to use that data to drive where your inclusion efforts need to be, than to be out in the dark and missing out on all these great opportunities that Fairness, Inclusion, Respect brings for you.
Yeah, thanks, Cathryn. Final question. I think you've made a very articulate case for having people at the centre of the sustainability agenda. What would your call to action be? What do we need to do?
Yeah, I think it would be, I've got a couple here, Sean. Firstly, I want businesses to actually see that FAIR is far from a nice to have, that people are an essential part of businesses operating at their best. And it's actually intrinsic to have good culture and good workplace environments to meet the challenges of the future. And linked to that, I guess, is the leadership element that, in my view, if you're not leading inclusively, if you don't understand what that means, in 2024, I'd strongly argue that you're not actually leading, even if you have the title. So there's a couple of things you can do to actually put this into action. Firstly, self-education is important. So you need to understand, if you're a leader, you need to understand that how this impacts your leadership style and what you can be doing. If you're a worker, you need to understand your colleagues, you need to appreciate the benefits that diversity brings. So that self-education element's really important. And of course, we've got through the school, we've got a great array of resources and training and tools to use. So make a start. It doesn't matter where you are on that journey. There is no excuse not to self-educate around this and really upskill yourself. Then people need to act inclusively. So this is where considering the business, the societal and the solutions aspects of sustainability comes in. So we mentioned before, if you're a procurement professional, you can actually drive this. If anyone working in a business should see their job as part of a green job, so to speak. So be a solution finder. Make sure you're looking out for what everyone can bring and promoting representation in the organisation and also decision making. There are little steps that everyone can do. And to delve more into that, we cover a lot of this in our training, and we have a Fur Ambassadors program, for example, to really upskill people to be able to be leading on this in their businesses. From a business perspective, they really need to set business goals. So businesses have to start taking responsibility for the behaviour and the culture in their business and beyond. And it's necessary to look at your practices and your policies, your governance, how you're embedding this into your business planning and your KPIs. Do you have KPIs around people and, satisfaction in the workplace and how productive your people are and the well-being aspects and how that might impact on how productive people are. So, ensure that you're driving sustainability, but you're also doing that where it's not at the expense of others as well. So there's a societal impact that comes in there. I've mentioned leadership and setting personal goals. Everyone can do something. And I think thinking about what you can personally do and how your actions can contribute is really important. And that might be as simple as realizing, actually, I've got people in my team that I don't really understand their background and I don't actually understand, what they do. For example, someone observes Ramadan and I don't understand what Ramadan is, and thinking, actually, I might just go and have a chat to that person and find out about it. And I might do some self-education myself, of course, because those from minoritised groups in the workforce don't have any obligation to be educating the rest of us. But there is a lot to be gained by that collaboration, that interest, that, I guess, conversation. In many cases, it starts as a conversation. And finally, capturing and monitoring diversity data as a business, I think, is really important. And if you're an individual in a business that's really keen to drive this forward, there is something you can do here. Even though this diversity monitoring is done at a business level, you can be asking, is my business doing this? Look, there's this great free tool, a free survey that we can benchmark against if we're in the built environment sector. If you're in other sectors, there's also similar opportunities to be doing this. There's lots of organisations that can help you around this. We should be tracking this. And if you're not, as a business, why aren't we? Start putting pressure on, start really, I guess, driving that accountability in your business from inside. So yeah, lots of exciting things that people can do. I don't want, I guess, the challenge of making a start on this to be an impediment to people starting. That often behaviours and cultures and the people element is left to last because it can be hard and people can see it as hard. But there is so much out there to help you on that journey, to upskill you, to give you an idea of where to start and how to start. For example, if you're a business, you can hop on and do our Fur Growth Assessment, which actually tells you exactly where you sit and what areas you should be focusing on first, and then directs you to specific resources and training to kick that off. So there's a lot there to help you, and I guess recognizing that people are on different levels of maturity, we all need to make a start, and there's so many different businesses. This is where we're seeing some great collaboration across supply chains and across the sector, because we're all in this together. It's not a competition. It's when someone says the climate's not a competition, it's a crisis, and it's going to be solved through collaboratively working together. And that's really the I guess the premise of the supply chain school, really, isn't it? Recognizing that collaboration across the whole supply chain is really key, and there's no need for people to reinvent the wheel, but use what's already there and let's do this together.
Let's do this together. That's a lovely message to end on. Cathryn, thanks very much. I think our audience are going to be fascinated to hear some of your depth of knowledge and insights into what's going on around this agenda. So thank you very much for your time. I'm sure our audience are going to love your presentation. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, Sean, for having me.
Thank you for listening to our podcast on Sense and Sustainability. Please listen out for more episodes. For more information, learning resources, tools, and much more content on sustainable procurement, go to www.iso2400.org.